Alright, hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be learning Module 1.3, which is on types of speeches. But before I begin, I just want to mention one thing. I know that the last module was very long, I think it was about 33 minutes or so. So I'm going to try and make it a goal to shorten the lengths of the videos from here on out. Hopefully I can get this one down to about 15 to 20 minutes at most. But I'm just going to restructuring the format in which I do my video lessons from now on, so just wanted to give you that heads up. That being said, go ahead and get out your notes so we can go ahead and start the lecture for today. Alright, so for this lesson, we're learning 6 different types of speeches. In order, they're narrative, compare and contrast, process analysis, cause and effect, descriptive, and persuasive. So go ahead and write that down. We're going to go ahead and get started with narrative. Alright, so narrative speeches. In a typical storybook or a novel, right, there's usually one person who's telling the story. And that person is known as the narrator. That's exactly what you're going to become in a narrative speech. You become the narrator because you're telling a story about yourself, right? So there's some ways that a narrative prompt may be framed for you. Some of these include name a time when you felt, I don't know, happy, sad, angry, whatever it is. You're talking about a point in time when you felt some type of way. Another way is name a time when you discovered something new about yourself, right? About the world, about human nature, about your friends. Could be any of these things. There's a huge range of ways that a narrative prompt can be framed. And so that's the really good thing about narrative speeches. You can make it personalized. You can shape the speech around yourself and you can get creative, right? Which is why the speech is mostly emotional. You really want to remember that. Whatever thoughts and feelings you had in that event or in that particular time, you want to convey that to the audience so that the audience feels exactly the way you were feeling at that time. All right, so when writing a narrative speech, there's a couple key things to remember. These are things that I remember at least when I'm writing a narrative speech. The first one is chronology, right? You want to ask yourself, is the order in which the events occurred clear? Does the audience, through your speech, does the audience get to understand exactly how you came to the realization that you came to? Or does the audience get to understand exactly like in what time frame these events occurred? You really want to make those things clear because that only helps the audience understand what you're trying to tell them. The second one is hook. The hook is, I think, very self-explanatory. You want to grab the audience's attention, basically. I mean, think of an essay, right? In your introduction, you typically include a hook so that the audience is immediately like that, right? They're attracted to what you're saying. The third one is always ask yourself, what message are you trying to convey to the audience? Keep that question in the back of your mind as you're writing your speech. All right, so our second type of speech is compare and contrast speeches. When you're presented with this kind of speech, I want you to think about a Venn diagram, right? So in a Venn diagram, you're comparing two events, A and B. Let's say, or events or ideas, A and B. So let's say one idea is icebergs and the other one is glaciers, right? So on one side of the Venn diagram, you're going to talk about things that are unique or specific to icebergs. On the other side, you're going to talk about things that are unique and specific to glaciers. And in the middle, where the circles intersect, you're going to talk about things. You're going to talk about characteristics that are shared across icebergs and glaciers, right? So a really good way to write and to chart out compare and contrast speeches is to draw a little Venn diagram and just put in key facts or information into that Venn diagram to start organizing your speech. Now, the essence of a compare and contrast speech, of course, is to explain the similarities and differences between two or more events, ideas, or things. Now, because of that, compare and contrast speeches, unlike narrative speeches, are way more fact-based, which means that whenever you're making an argument, you really want to make sure you're presenting a lot of evidence to back up that argument. Okay, so to quickly run down again, the key things to remember in compare and contrast speeches. What I think about are 3 main things. So pick only the most significant similarities and differences. What you're going to find after your research is that there's so many things that are different and similar between the two or more events that you're comparing and contrasting. So really ask yourself which ones do I want to include? Which ones are the most important? So the second one is the number of differences should roughly equal the number of similarities. I think that one's pretty straightforward. So just, whenever you're writing a compare and contrast speech, keep that in your mind as you're writing it. You want to show the audience both sides. And then the third one kind of ties back into the first one, which is use your similarities and differences to make the purpose of your speech more clear, right? In any speech, really, you have a purpose. You're trying to tell the audience something. So make sure that you're using the similarities and differences that you pick to make that purpose even clearer, right? Which is why I say pick the most significant similarities and differences when you're writing this kind of speech. All right, so our third one is process analysis speeches. When you hear that you need to write a process analysis speech, I want you to think about a cookbook, right? In a cookbook, you're given a set of instructions that you need to execute step by step in order to make a certain recipe, right? That's exactly what a process analysis speech is. You just want to give your audience a set of instructions to execute chronologically to achieve some end goal. Right, so some process analysis speeches, some prompts include how to tie your shoes, how to boil water, right? These are all questions that we ask people, expecting that they're going to tell us how to do them via a set of procedures or instructions. But that's exactly what makes process analysis speeches very boring, actually. And they're supposed to be very boring because they lack emotion almost completely. You want to make these purely informational and purely fact-based. Okay, process analysis speeches, again, key things to remember, just to recap. The first one, write detailed step-by-step instructions. This means be precise in your language. Make sure you're picking and choosing the right words so that your instructions are very clear. The best way to ensure this is by doing the second one. Think about yourself as an audience member. Right? Film yourself. Listen to your own speech. If you were someone who heard this speech, would you understand what to do? Keep that question in the back of your mind as you write a process analysis speech. All right, so our fourth type of speeches are cause and effect speeches. So these are more opinionated. That's the first thing I want you to remember, which means you want to use a lot more evidence to back up the claims you are making. And in essence, what cause and effect speeches really are is you're just identifying an event or series of events that induce another event or another series of events. So a great example, actually a really big example, really relevant example also right now, is climate change. A lot of scientists and a lot of politicians too, are debating what the real causes of climate change are, right? So on one hand, we have causes X, Y, Z. These are just variables, of course, for different types of causes. And the effect would be climate change, right? So that's the point I'm really trying to stress, is that there's multiple causes that can go into one effect, or there's maybe just one cause that could go into inducing multiple effects. So you really want to make that clear in your speech, and if that's the case, you want to back it up with lots of evidence. Okay, so a couple of key things to remember for cause and effect speeches. Number one, use lots of evidence. I already said this, but make sure that you're using a lot of evidence to back up what you're saying. Number two, emotion can be a part of your speech. It is allowed, and in fact, I actually encourage it. But make sure that it is warranted emotion. Meaning, go back to the first point that I made here. Make sure that the evidence you're using warrants the emotion in your speech. Number three, each of your causes and effects, meaning each of your reasons, should be distinct. And that should be very clear in your speech. Meaning, you should have different causes and effects, and you should be making that very clear. And the last one is, in your conclusion, you want to restate your reasons. But you only want to restate them very briefly. Meaning, obviously don't go over your speech in its entirety all over again. Just restate those reasons and leave it at that. All right, fifth type of speech, descriptive speeches. These speeches are mainly characterized by their abundance of detail. So what exactly does this mean? They're packed with adjectives, they have tons of imagery, and they have lots and lots of sensory details. So what exactly are those things? Adjectives are words that describe nouns, right? So surprise, surprise, in a descriptive speech, you're going to have to include lots of details, which is exactly why you want to have a ton of words that are describing words, essentially. The second one is imagery, right? In a descriptive speech, you want to paint a very clear picture in your audience's mind of what exactly you're talking about. So, for example, if you were in a farm or something, right? Let's say you were in a farm strawberry picking. So you want to paint a very clear picture of the scenario, which is that farm. You want to say, oh, the field was filled with red, luscious strawberries around me. Whenever I touched these strawberries, the texture was very rough. But when I put it in my mouth, there's a burst of sweetness, right? Something like that. You're painting a very clear picture. The last one is, again, directly tied to imagery, and that's sensory details. If you want to paint a picture in your audience's mind, you're going to have to make appeals to sight, smell, hearing, touch, taste, right? All the 5 sensory details. All right, so key things to remember for descriptive speeches. Always ask yourself, of course, what is the event or idea you're trying to describe, right? Always keep that question in the back of your head. And secondly, think of yourself as an audience member, right? As I said earlier, film yourself. Listen to yourself speaking. If you were in the audience, would you understand what it is that you are conveying, right? Really ask yourself as you write and as you deliver the descriptive speech. And then there's 3 main elements that you always want to incorporate in any descriptive speech. They're imagery, sensory details, and just in general, lots and lots of descriptions, right? Of course, it's a descriptive speech. So what exactly does that mean? I mean, take some event or idea and break it down to its most fundamental parts, right? That is the way you describe something so well that an audience member is able to clearly imagine what you are describing, what event or idea you are describing. All right, the final and probably the most important one are persuasive speeches. So in persuasive speeches, you're making an argument, meaning you're persuading, obviously, or convincing the audience to do something, to take action on something you strongly believe. So the number one most important thing in a persuasive speech is to present yourself confidently, because you really want the audience to have faith in you and have faith in what you are saying. Now, really, every other type of speech is a subcategory of persuasive speech. That is because in every speech, you are always making an argument. That is the point of a speech, right? Why are you telling people something if you don't want them to believe what you are saying, right? You simply don't do that. You're always making an argument. So always remember, whenever you're crafting any type of speech, the basis for that speech, which comes from the definition of a persuasive speech, which is that you're always making an argument. Now, persuasive speeches contain a blend of emotions, which is pathos, credibility, morals, and ethics, which is ethos, and facts and evidence, which is logos. Now, those are the Greek words, ethos, pathos, logos, which is also known as the rhetorical triangle. We'll be going into that more in depth, so just remember those little characteristics by, obviously, the English words. All right, so to wrap up, to recap really quickly, key things to remember for persuasive speeches. First one is clear organization. Make sure you have a clear thesis or purpose, or essentially a main claim in your introduction. Then in your body, have your reasons or your subclaims in order, so you list out exactly the specific arguments you're making to prove your point. And then finally, you want to have a quick, brief conclusion to wrap up, right? You want to make sure you leave an impact on your audience. You want to make sure your audience clearly understands why you believe what you believe and for what reasons you believe what you believe. But most importantly, however, is confidence. You cannot deliver a good persuasive speech unless you are confident in what you're saying, because that will give you away to your audience. Basically, your audience will realize and understand that you truly don't believe in what you're saying. So why should they believe in what you're saying, right? So always make sure you present yourself extremely confidently so that your audience senses that in you, and they look to you for motivation, for inspiration, and as a leader. That is the essence of public speaking. All right. Thank you guys for watching this lesson. Go ahead and review your notes for the quiz, and I will see you in the next lecture.